New Guinea, November 1942. Captain Thomas "Tom" Lynch lined up on a Japanese Zero and did something that should have been impossible. He fired from 500 yards away. Every pilot knew that was suicide. At 500 yards, wing-mounted guns sprayed bullets so wide that you'd be lucky to hit a barn. The doctrine was clear, close to 200 yards before firing. Anything else was wasted ammunition. But Lynch wasn't flying a conventional fighter. He was flying a P-38 Lightning, a twin-boom freak with all its guns clustered in the nose. No wing mounts, no convergence problems. Just 4 50-caliber machine guns and a cannon pointed straight ahead like a laser beam. Lynch squeezed the trigger. The Zero didn't just get hit, it disintegrated. The concentrated firepower struck the wing root, the engine, and the cockpit simultaneously. The aircraft folded in on itself and fell from the sky in pieces. Lynch's wingman, who was watching from behind, keyed his radio. "Jesus Christ, Tom, you didn't shoot him down, you vaporized him." The P-38's guns had earned a new nickname that day, the Buzzsaw. 6 months earlier, Army Air Corps officials had mocked this exact design. Overkill, they'd called it. Too much firepower concentrated in one place. A specialist weapon, too complex for regular pilots. The convergence problem is manageable. Wing guns are fine. They were about to learn how wrong they were. By the end of the war, the P-38's nose-mounted guns would produce America's 2 highest-scoring aces. Its devastating firepower would earn it another nickname from the Japanese, Fork-tailed Devil. And the overkill that critics mocked would become the standard for every fighter aircraft designed since. But first, let me explain the deadly problem that Kelly Johnson solved. Here's something that seems simple but killed hundreds of pilots. When you mount guns in the wings of an aircraft, the bullets don't travel parallel paths. They angle inward toward the center of the aircraft. Why? Because if they flew straight out, they'd never hit anything directly in front of the plane. The pilot aims with the nose, so the bullets need to cross at the point where the nose is pointing. This crossing point is called convergence. Seems logical, right? Set your convergence at 300 yards, and any target at 300 yards will be hit by all your bullets at once. Maximum damage. Here's the trap. If the target is at 200 yards, the bullets haven't crossed yet. They're still spread wide. Some will miss left, some will miss right. You might hit with half your rounds, maybe less. If the target is at 400 yards, the bullets have already crossed and are spreading apart again. Same problem, wide pattern, wasted ammunition. The only point where all your firepower concentrates is that single convergence distance. And in a dogfight, you almost never engage at exactly the distance you've set. Enemies are diving, climbing, turning. Distances change by the second. You're pulling G-forces that blur your vision. You're checking your 6 for threats behind you. You're trying to stay alive. Nobody has time to calculate exact distances. So what happened? American pilots sprayed thousands of rounds and hit nothing. After-action reports from 1942 painted a grim picture. P-40 pilots reported firing their entire ammunition load, over 1,500 rounds, without scoring a single kill. P-39 pilots complained that their wing guns scattered like a shotgun at anything beyond 300 yards. The Zero, with its tight maneuvering, could dance around these spraying attacks. Japanese pilots learned to stay at awkward distances, knowing American guns were ineffective. The convergence trap was killing American pilots, and nobody seemed to know how to fix it. Nobody except one radical engineer who was already building the solution. The solution to the convergence problem was obvious. Put all the guns in the nose. If all the barrels point in the same direction, there is no convergence. Every bullet travels the same path. The firepower is concentrated at every distance, 100 yards or 1,000 yards. So why didn't everyone do this? Because with conventional single-engine fighters, the nose was occupied by something important, the engine. Kelly Johnson didn't have that problem. Clarence Kelly Johnson was the chief research engineer at Lockheed, and he was building something that had never existed before. The P-38 Lightning was a twin-engine fighter with the engines mounted on booms that extended back to the tail. This created a configuration unlike any other American fighter, and it left the nose completely empty. Johnson saw this empty space and made a decision that would change aerial warfare forever. Instead of mounting guns in the wings like every other fighter, he clustered them all in the nose cone. 4 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns and one Hispano-Suiza 20mm cannon, all firing from a single compact location. The concentrated firepower was unlike anything pilots had ever experienced. No convergence issues. The guns were mounted essentially parallel, all pointing straight ahead. What you aimed at was what you hit at any distance. The 20mm cannon added a new dimension. While the 50 calibers peppered the target with high-velocity rounds, the cannon shells delivered explosive impact that could cripple an aircraft with a single hit. All 5 weapons firing together created what test pilots described as a solid stream of projectiles, not a spray pattern, not a scattered shotgun blast, a concentrated beam of destruction. Kelly Johnson was excited. He believed he'd solved one of aerial combat's fundamental problems. The Army Air Corps was skeptical. When Johnson presented the P-38's armament configuration, the reception was lukewarm at best. That's a lot of firepower concentrated in one spot. If the 20mm cannon jams, you've got limited redundancy. Wing guns allow for a wider field of fire. This seems restrictive. The P-38 is already complex. Adding a nose mount system increases maintenance requirements. Johnson tried to explain the convergence advantages. He showed diagrams of bullet dispersion. He argued that concentrated firepower would result in more kills with less ammunition. The officials nodded politely. Then they ordered P-38s to be evaluated alongside conventional fighters, as if the armament configuration was just an interesting quirk rather than a revolutionary improvement. Johnson was frustrated but not deterred. He knew the mathematics. He knew the physics. And he knew that eventually American pilots would fly his aircraft into combat and prove him right. The P-38's nose guns didn't just solve convergence, they created a completely new kind of weapon. When all those rounds hit the same small area simultaneously, the cumulative damage was catastrophic. Aircraft that might survive a wing gun burst were literally torn apart by the concentrated impact. Pilots would soon have a name for this phenomenon. They called it the buzz saw, and the Japanese would call it something else entirely, the fork-tailed devil. The first P-38s arrived in the Pacific in late 1942. Pilots were skeptical. The Lightning was big, complicated. 2 engines meant double the maintenance headaches. The twin-boom configuration looked strange, and then they started shooting. The difference was immediately apparent. Lieutenant Kenneth Sparks described his first kill in a P-38. I fired from maybe 400 yards. With my old P-39, I would have missed completely at that range. The bullets would have sprayed all around the target, but the Lightning's guns were like pointing a finger. Everything hit the same spot. The target, a Mitsubishi Betty bomber, didn't just catch fire. The wing separated from the fuselage mid-flight. Word spread quickly through the squadron. The P-38's concentrated firepower had a specific effect that pilots started describing with the same phrase over and over. It could saw pieces off enemy aircraft, not punch holes. Saw created stresses that aircraft structures couldn't withstand. Wing spars failed. Fuselage frames collapsed. Control surfaces were severed. One burst. One piece of airplane falling away. Captain Thomas Lynch, who we met in the opening, became famous for these clean kills. He developed a technique of aiming for the wing root, the structural junction where the wing met the fuselage, and firing a single concentrated burst. The wing would fold up like a broken umbrella. Lynch racked up 20 kills using this method. Each one was a clinical execution rather than a desperate spray of bullets. The Japanese took notice. Unlike the American P-40s and P-39s they'd been fighting, the P-38 killed with precision. One pass, one burst, one dead aircraft. The intelligence reports started calling it Perobo, the fork-tailed devil, a two-tailed demon that brought death from impossible distances. But the buzzsaw effect wasn't just about killing enemies, it was about changing the psychology of aerial combat. Something unexpected happened as P-38 pilots gained experience. They stopped missing. Not because they became better marksmen, because the nose-mounted guns removed the guesswork from shooting. Think about it. A P-47 pilot with wing-mounted guns had to calculate range, estimate convergence, adjust for the spread pattern, and hope his burst connected. It was more art than science. A P-38 pilot just pointed the nose at the target and fired. Where the nose pointed, the bullets went. Simple, direct, deadly. This simplicity produced something remarkable. America's top aces, Richard Bong, Thomas Maguire, Charles McDonald, Gerald Johnson, the top-scoring American pilots of World War II, almost all flew P-38s. Not because they were the best pilots, because their weapon system eliminated variables that caused other pilots to miss. Richard Bong scored 40 confirmed kills, the highest total for any American pilot in any war. He flew P-38s exclusively in combat. Thomas Maguire scored 38 kills. Also, P-38s. Between them, these two men shot down 78 enemy aircraft. How many rounds did they waste spraying at targets outside convergence range? Almost none. The concentrated firepower created a feedback loop. More hits meant shorter engagements. Shorter engagements meant less exposure to enemy return fire. Less exposure meant survival. Survival meant more opportunities to score kills. The P-38 pilots called their gun system the finger of God, a phrase that captured the almost supernatural accuracy of nose-mounted weapons. You pointed, God struck. The Army Air Corps officials who had mocked the Overkill design quietly stopped complaining. It turned out that Overkill was exactly what aerial combat needed. The weapon system they called Too Specialized became the template for every fighter designed since. Look at the F-86 Sabre, the F-4 Phantom, the F-15 Eagle, the F-22 Raptor. Every modern American fighter has weapons concentrated in the nose or center line, directly in front of the pilot's aim. Wing-mounted guns, once standard, became obsolete. Kelly Johnson's Overkill became the only logical answer. By 1944, the P-38 had become the terror of the Pacific. Japanese pilots developed specific tactics to avoid engaging lightning. They would dive away rather than turn fight. They would attack only with numerical superiority. They treated the fork-tailed devil with a respect they showed few other American aircraft. The P-38's reputation grew from more than just the gun system. The twin engines meant survivability. Pilots who lost one engine could limp home on the other. The turbo superchargers meant high-altitude performance that left Japanese aircraft gasping. But the guns remained the defining feature. In the European theater, the P-38 was less dominant. The cold temperatures at high altitude caused engine troubles. The Luftwaffe had aircraft that could match its performance. P-51 Mustangs eventually replaced Lightnings in many roles. But in the Pacific, where the P-38 fought at lower altitudes against a different enemy, it reigned supreme. The concentrated firepower that critics had questioned proved decisive against the lightly armored Japanese aircraft. Zeros, Oscars, and Bettys couldn't absorb the punishment that the P-38's buzzsaw delivered. One burst, one kill, move to the next target. The efficiency was devastating. When the war ended, the P-38 had destroyed over 1,800 Japanese aircraft in aerial combat. It had produced more American aces than any other aircraft. It had validated Kelly Johnson's radical design decision, and it had changed fighter design forever. The P-38 Lightning was retired shortly after World War II. Jets were coming. The twin-engine, twin-boom configuration was obsolete. The aircraft that had terrorized the Pacific became a footnote, but Kelly Johnson's lesson endured. Every jet fighter designed since World War II has followed the principle he established. Concentrate firepower where the pilot is aiming. The F-86 Sabre put its 6 machine guns in the nose. The F-4 Phantom mounted its cannon on the center line. Modern fighters carry their weapons in pods or internal bays aligned with the aircraft's axis. Nobody uses wing-mounted guns anymore. The convergence trap that killed pilots in 1942 is now a historical curiosity. A problem solved so completely that modern pilots don't even know it existed. That's Kelly Johnson's legacy. Not just the P-38, not just the buzzsaw, but the fundamental understanding that concentrated, precise firepower beats scattered spray every time. The critics called it overkill. Johnson called it engineering. And 1-800 Japanese aircraft called it the last thing they ever saw. Richard Bong survived the war but died in August 1945 testing a P-80 jet fighter. Thomas Maguire died in January 1945 during a dogfight, pushing his P-38 too hard while trying to save a wingman. Both men received the Medal of Honor. Both men owed their success to a gun system that critics had dismissed as too much. When Kelly Johnson heard about their kills, he didn't take credit. He just kept designing aircraft, but he knew what he'd proven. The standard way wasn't always the right way. Wing-mounted guns were standard. They were also inferior. Concentrated firepower was overkill. It was also exactly what pilots needed to survive. The fork-tailed devil didn't just win dogfights. It proved that questioning the accepted wisdom is sometimes the only way to save lives. The experts laughed at the buzzsaw. The Japanese didn't find it funny at all. If this story of engineering genius and devastating firepower gripped you, smash that subscribe button right now. This channel uncover the forgotten stories of World War II, the innovations that changed warfare, the engineers who proved the experts wrong, and the weapons that became legends. Tap that bell icon so you never miss when I drop a new video, and I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Did you know about the convergence trap before this video? What other World War II weapon problems do you want me to cover? Let me know. Share this with someone who loves aviation history. And if you want another incredible World War II story right now, the next video is already waiting on screen.